Hey everybody, good morning in TLDC land. So I am excited to be here as usual. I do this about once a month. I'm Toddi. If you guys don't know who I am, I've been doing this for a couple of years, as much as I can with the day job. So today I'm actually really lucky to be interviewing a guest, which is one of my favorite things to do. And I have Bejanae Kareem with me today. So she actually came to us as a recommendation from a couple of folks who follow her work and actually I think have been mentored by her as well. And so I'm excited to know more about what she does. She runs a company called BK Consultancy. Is that right?
That's the short version. BK International Education Consultancy is the longer version.
I thought my business name was long. Okay, cool. Excellent. So essentially, I'll just kind of give you kind of the lay of the land on TLDC. You know, we're a training, learning, and development collective group of folks who are very passionate about what we do. And we have a chat on the side, and our chats can get pretty animated. Good morning, Luis. I see you there. We're really glad to see you, actually. I'm hoping you're not evacuated, but you might be. So anyway, we do these kinds of interviews to get to know some of the people who are associated with our what we call our tribe. So I'm excited, and I love to start things out with you telling us a little bit about your origin story and about yourself. So I'll let you rock with that. And if I happen to have to go on mute, it's because the dogs are barking or the squirrel outside my window is chirping.
So. No worries at all. No worries at all. Yeah. So my origin story, just in terms of, I guess, how the consultancy got started. I would have to definitely go all the way back to high school. My interest in STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, was sparked there. I had an amazing high school teacher who made science hands-on, creative, and fun. And I hadn't experienced science throughout my education in that way. And so this grew my interest in majoring in biology and chemistry in college. And
Cool.
so in my early career, I was actually in the environmental and food science industries. And I later transitioned into the wonderful world of K through 12 education. And
Okay.
yes, so that's actually my origin story into the consultancy, and have ever since then really been merging my passions for education, science, and tech ever since.
So what drew you to K through 12, and kind of how did you end up there versus, and I know you do some adult consulting as well, but like what drew you there?
Yeah, so in my transition from just obtaining my bachelor's degree, I thought I wanted to go and obtain my master's right away. And in researching programs and different opportunities, I actually found out about a program called Teach for America. And Teach for America really resonated with me because the focus was on children, providing quality education for all children, not just some, but for all and every child here in the United States. And so that really spoke to me, as well as the fact that I come from a long line of educators as well. So I would have to say it probably was in my DNA. And so I taught as an elementary school teacher for 10 years. And during that time, I recognized that children, they need fun and challenging and hands-on experiences with science early in their education. For me, I think I had that spark in high school, but after teaching elementary, I was like, okay, this needs to start much early on. This needs to happen much early on. And then I also realized that teachers going through their teacher preparation programs, they may have had maybe one class in science. And so I also realized that they needed support in building their capacity and their instructional strategies on creating these fun and engaging ways to implement, science and math and technology into the classroom. And so after my experience of teaching and working at a local university where our focus was career changers who were interested in working in urban elementary schools with the focus on STEM, I was like, okay, I see there's a greater need here. I could be more of service if I help support the educators who are educating children. And so that's when I launched BK International Education Consultancy in 2012, just to help teachers and parents find creative and low cost ways and
Mhm.
to be able to engage children in science and STEM and STEAM.
Wow, that's super cool. So, and I think that's one of the things that we tend to not think about is, what level of support teachers need to be able to bring those, resources into the classroom. I think back to, like we were talking before we came on, and I don't know that I was really particularly inspired by science or STEM or STEAM topics until I was probably in high school, and that had a lot to do with a teacher as well,
Mm-hmm.
who really inspired me to care about science and exposed our entire group to thought panels like run by universities on
Ah,
the science of the times. And so I mentioned to you that as a high schooler, I got to meet Carl Sagan.
so
But
cool.
amazing, like talk about a game changer. But I also got exposed to, panel discussions on, topics that were climate science based. This was in the 80s before we were
Mm.
really talking about this, because I lived near the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and
Oh.
they cooperated a lot with the University of Colorado in Boulder. And so, the kinds of things that we were exposed to really challenged us to think like the scientists were thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was just one single instructor who came from the UK, by the way.
Oh.
It was a little, very avant-garde instructor who, didn't have a car because he crashed it driving down the wrong side of the road. Um, and we would all pick him
Oh
up
goodness.
hitchhiking. He hitchhiked to school, and so we'd all pick him up.
Oh my
This was in
goodness.
the 80s, but just that one single person literally changed my mindset with respect to science, technology, engineering, and math. And now I'm probably one of the biggest science geeks you're ever going to find. I
Likewise.
That is like super cool. So now, what other types of things are you doing in your consultancy? Because I know that you're also working with adults, and so your primary audience is your adult teachers,
That
correct?
is correct. That is correct.
Okay.
You
Okay.
mind? I'm going to pull up a slide here if you don't
Okay. Yeah.
mind.
Super
Yeah.
cool. I'm
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually reduce my bandwidth so that you have more. I'll turn off my
Okay.
video.
Sharing is caring. All right. All right. So a little bit about BK International Education Consultancy. So as I mentioned before, like our focus are the adults and children's lives. So our mission is to strengthen educator practices to better serve all students. And our expertise are what we call the 3 Ps. So program design, professional learning, or also continuing education and training, as well
Mhm.
as project management. So those are our 3 big buckets of work. And so they're general and they're broad, but we also have this special interest and focus around STEM and STEAM education and being able to provide that material and that content in culturally responsive ways. So those are
Very,
our big service areas, so to speak.
very cool. So what kinds of things are you doing then to get the adults excited? Um,
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
exactly,
'Cause
right?
that's the big challenge that we all face in learning and development, right? Is that, the adults that we work with in L&D and corporations, like we think we talk about gamification and, like I was fortunate enough to work with an Army program where the controller for the robot, okay, robot first off, cool, right?
Right.
The hand controller looked like an Xbox controller. So, like, how are we engaging adults so that they can impart that excitement to kids? Like I'm really curious on some of your techniques there.
Yeah. So what I've learned, having been a classroom teacher for over 10 years, and then self-teaching my way through in adult education and instructional design is there are many parallels between adult education and educating children. There's a lot of
Yeah.
parallels. So one of those being is making it real and relevant for adults, right? So what I notice is that oftentimes when you bring up the word science or technology, unless it's like a passion, like it is for you, Toddi, or for myself, um, it, people often shy away and don't see how it's related to their everyday life. So
Mhm.
making those connections explicit, like the devices that we're using actually right now to be able to live stream, right? There was science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and arts involved and able to make this happen. So making those connections.
Oh yeah.
Um, And then
You
also the
should
fact that,
analyze that someday and pick it apart.
yeah, exactly, like really unpacking that. So it's connected to our everyday life. We, even as human beings, are science walking, right? Like we're
Mhm.
everyday science walking. And then just also knowing that STEM and STEAM, they're not new concepts. They've been around for years, even though the term has grown in popularity. Think about the Egyptian pyramids. What
Mhm.
kind of ingenuity and steam did it take to build those? The Eiffel Tower in Paris, or even the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Like all these things took these integrated STEAM and STEM concepts to be able to build and develop. So these concepts are not new. They've been around. Um, and I think that's important for teachers to understand is that, you know, a lot of time, having been an educator, a lot of time we're inundated with, oh, here's a new thing that I have to add to my plate and learn to be able to teach my children. And I think making it seem not so far away and connected to their everyday life, it makes them more comfortable to be able to want to know more. Because like, oh, okay, I may have been doing this already, or it's already a part of my everyday, life. So
Right.
making it real and relevant, I think, is definitely one key.
Well, and I think that's a big takeaway for everything that we do in learning, right? I'm thinking back to helping a team that I worked with in Colorado come up with a core competency for engineering. And of course, these are engineers; they're already like very science engineering minded. And so, I guess first of all,
Mhm.
let's define STEM: science, technology, engineering, and math. And
Right.
then STEAM is the addition of arts. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. But they're already these engineers are already integrated into this mindset. But then, how do we make them care about the learning that we're putting them through? And that was actually one of the big things that we looked at in this entire project to align them to the core competencies that we were teaching as a company is how can we make them excited? And part of that became a number one, gamifying some of the learning that we were doing with them, but also introducing them to some new technologies that even as engineers they hadn't really encountered.
Mm,
Some of the tool sets and making them excited about that. And so I think that, those are certainly takeaways. I always say there's never going to be a learning situation where anybody is actually going to adopt a change until they care about it or it impacts them. So
exactly.
how do we do that? That's super cool. I'm actually really excited, like by thinking in terms of changing our mindset to think of how
Mhm.
can we excite someone to want to learn, or how do we make that relevant to them. Um, I know, that's always a big question across the board when you're training. But so, what kinds of relevance techniques are you using to get people excited? Are like real world examples or use case studies? I'm just curious.
Yeah, yeah. So a variety of things, and I think it definitely starts with, as you just mentioned, relationship building in a way. So really getting to know your audience and who you are supporting. Relationships are key. I mean, even now with COVID and online learning, like relationships are still key, even in those remote environments. So one, having an understanding of who your learner is,
Hmm.
whether it's
Hmm.
students, whether it's adults, and then tapping into their prior knowledge, their previous experiences, as well as what their interests are. If you can tap into that, then you can build a bridge to learning much more easily than just pushing, content, I would say, onto them. That's how you create lifelong learners. I mean, think about it. I mean, things that you probably are interested in or I'm interested in, we don't mind going and reading more about it or exploring about those things because it's of interest to us. So it's the same. It's the same way for adults and for children. I would say another thing is unpacking, excuse me, on STEAM and STEM, and while yes, it is technical, but also communicating the fact that it embodies life skills such as creativity, such as critical thinking, such as communication and collaboration. Those all those, those have some pieces of soft skills. Those are
Hmm.
life skills that you use in your everyday situation. For example, come home and I switch on my light and the light does not turn on, I immediately have to go into some type of problem solving mode, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
what engineers do, like, here's a problem here. What are my constraints to the situation? Let me try a few things, trial and error, see if they work. If they don't, then I need to go back and figure out another solution, or revise my thinking or my process. So again, making sure that learners know that while yes, it's technical, it's also life skills, not just this separate
Right.
thing that only is attainable, by a certain few that have this high, IQ, so to speak.
Right. Well, and I love the way you frame that because coming from the quasi engineering background that I come from, in the work that I've done, I would call that root cause analysis. I mean, that like a kind of a basic engineering teaching that, you take the problem and you start to analyze, okay, what's the problem here? Have I checked this? Like where's the actual issue? And what a small, compact, finite example that anybody can relate to. I love that. I mean, like, I don't know that I would actually think in that way. So that's awesome. That's really cool.
Right. Just trying to make it real to the person in their everyday experiences, and then bridging over that connection to what can be done in the classroom in an instructional, setting.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then also hands-on. So, science, engineering, technology, they're about doing. They're not just about reading what has been done, right? It's about actually getting in there and doing some things and building and thinking creatively and outside of the box. And that can happen whether you're in person or you're social distancing or you're in a remote learning environment.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and it's funny because I was recently challenged by someone to come up with a model to use on a virtual classroom for something that I had done a long time ago, actually, with a set of students, actually ninth grade boys, which, that's a challenging audience to begin
That's a
with.
tough crowd. That's a tough crowd.
Definitely. And I recall it was a class where we were teaching biodiversity. And so, we basically came up with kind of like the same scenario that a scientist in, your local forestry group would encounter, which was, here are the invasive species in an area. Here's the problem with them. And we gave them that very finite challenge to say, okay, you've been provisioned the ability to only go after, removing one invasive species from your area. Now let's triage this out and figure out which one you're going to go after and then defend it. It's just like a really interesting challenge that we did. And we did this in the classroom, but then I recently actually pulled that example as something that I wanted to be able to deliver virtually and figure out how could I, deliver something virtually and how would I engage somebody? And I got to thinking, like you literally could create drag and drops where, online you could allow people to do the analysis and say, okay, which invasive species is causing the most problem and how do I look at that? But again, putting someone into the frame of here, I'm in the scientist mindset. I'm in the role of a job in my community. But super cool stuff. And
Yeah, and
out in you.
no, and that actually leads to my next point, kind of like our guiding principles. So you had asked earlier, just kind of like our framework and how do we engage, educators. So these are our guiding principles. Is one, content integration, right? Science, using the use of science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics in this integrated instead of isolated way.
Right.
In schools nowadays, or even in college courses. You tend to have, a math block, and then you have a science block, and then you have a social studies block, and then you have your language arts blocks. The best way is to integrate those things so students understand how life is connected, how things are connected, and these concepts work in concert with each other. So content integration is key. The hands-on, minds-on that I had mentioned earlier, making it about doing. Reading is great. You have to do your research. But also getting in there and providing those kinesthetics experiences, it taps into different learners' learning styles.
Right.
And as you just mentioned with your biodiversity example, that was real world. That was a real world experience. Why should I care, about this random context? But those kids are actually problem solving a situation that is actually happening and is an issue now. So what better way than to empower students to be, great productive citizens than to get them involved early, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that real world relevance and rigor. And then we also like to use the PBL. So there's 4 of them. So there's project-based learning, which I think is most popular.
Okay.
There's also problem-based learning, which is really great for uh, infusing like engineering concepts and engineering challenges. There's
Mm-hmm.
also place-based learning, where you take a look at communities and solve problems within those communities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's you got place-based, problem-based, project-based, and there's one that's called like phenomenon based. That's a
Mm-hmm.
newer one, but it's also just focused on like the science. It's the entry point for science,
Okay.
science challenges and things of that nature. So these are our guiding principles when we're setting up learning for our adult learners, as
Mm-hmm.
well as what we model and expect for teachers to be able to um, engage students in high quality learning. So this is kind of like our engagement model, so to speak. So making it,
Wow.
integrated, real, relevant, hands-on, and with those projects or problems.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Well, and it's funny because, with COVID, you think, okay, well, I can't go out and engage, but I think that's actually not true. I mean, part of what I had, suggested was that, maybe each student take their own surrounding backyard or, their city block or something that, impacts them in their local neighborhood. And actually, the funny part was as I started doing some research, I found that like just my local New Hampshire county actually has a group dedicated to essentially triaging and getting rid of invasive species
Wow.
in a county.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think we don't have good insight sometimes as citizens as to what actually is happening that within groups that are working on science problems. I mean, we got lots of science problems we need to solve for, but like just making that application locally for somebody who's even working virtually with a team, it's like it's possible. Even if you live on a city block, there's still plenty of science um, things that are impacting us in every environment. So, and you can always modify too.
And that makes it more engaging for them because normally they live in that community, right? Or they are a part of that. So it makes it real for them. One
Mm-hmm.
of our flagship programs, although our the bulk of our focus are on educators
Mm-hmm.
and teachers, and whether that's in the K through 12 setting, it could be for youth organizations or nonprofits. We have this flagship program called Project Smart. And so Project Smart is unique because it helps tackle learning for both teachers and for students. So our Project Smart is led by state certified mentors who have had teaching experience or industry experience, and they help guide teachers in delivering online STEAM based instruction. And
Got
it
it.
also helps, yeah, and it also helps them build their educational technology chops, so to speak. And so while they are learning that, they're provided with this curriculum
Mm-hmm.
and they deliver it to a small group of students. And so not only are the teachers getting this real-time coaching, job embedded coaching, and it's not just a one-stop shop training. I get 1 day of training and I'm expect to be a master of this content and go for it to the masses and deliver it. They're getting coaching, and then students get the benefit because they're also
Right.
in a setting where you have this master teacher, so to speak, this mentor, as well
Mm-hmm.
as this teacher who's learning these practices. So it's a win-win. It's a win-win situation.
Very cool. So everybody's actually learning as they go along. I have someone I might refer to you on that program.
Okay,
Doing
excellent.
teaching online with young people in cybersecurity. Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
and his, a part of the teaching has been to come up with some, challenge-based learning. But, I know it's been a challenge for all of us in this craziness, to figure out how we can take what was traditionally classroom-based or even partially classroom-based and bring that online. And you think, oh, cybersec, we can bring that all online. Well, you still have to find the practical applications for that and ways to engage. It's like the engagement piece is the hard part.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate engineering design challenge it is. How do we convert this model to this model for effective online teaching, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it's been crazy. So, well, that's pretty exciting. So, and kind of going back to the student model,
Mm-hmm.
like how do you engage that age group? I mean, like K through 12 is a huge block.
It is.
Um, at the high school end of things, you've got, people who are distracted. I mean, it's just, at a certain age level, they're more distracted by friends and social things and their devices. And, in the middle school age, I think they're a little more impressionable. The younger kids, I always say there's kind of a sweet spot in there almost, and my nephew is 10 and I've been sending science development kits to him in the mail. Because he's really smart, and I think there's an age where you can kind of capture them, but then at the really young ages, how do you engage them? I think that's a big question for parents, especially now. Like with the kids in the office with them, is there some way to engage them in activities that are learning activities?
So here's the thing, at that age, they're already engaged. Like kids are already they're already creative. They already think outside of the box, especially elementary, pre-K through elementary. They're creative. They like to when they can't play in the dirt, and they like dinosaurs, and they like the gadgets, right? So it's already there. So
Mm-hmm.
why not leverage and build off of it? In the same way that I approach learning with educators, it's the same thing that you have to do with children. So find out first, build those relationships. What are they interested in? And then build from there, because they already have it. It's just when kids get sent to school, then they unlearn sometimes, unfortunately, how not to be as creative, because you think, oh, for a math problem, there's just one way to do it. Well, no, there's multiple entry points on how to do it, right?
Absolutely.
Well,
and I was thinking, I saw this, I think on CBS Sunday Morning this week, where the Rube Goldberg challenge was taken online. And
oh,
so
I hadn't seen that. I hadn't
oh
seen
my
that.
gosh, I'll have to find that for you and send it to you. But so families got involved in this, and it was great for the moms. There were a couple moms saying it was great because they got to do the work they needed to do while the rest of the family was building Rube Goldberg challenges around the house, using what they had in the home. And, the challenge actually was to, have something be automated for you to wash your hands. And so it was the daughter of the founder of the Rube Goldberg challenge. But again, like that whole mindset of figuring it out and iteratively. The way that I this is just me speaking, I feel like science should be iterative. But
It is.
using iterative process to determine what works best. We're seeing some of that, I think, now in more of a less formalized application of science. And I just looked at my computer and realized I need to plug it in. Hang on.
No worries. But no, I completely agree with you, just in terms of that iterative process, and that oftentimes that part is missing in schools. Like you turn your paper in and that's it, right? You may not get an opportunity to go back and maybe, do your paper again. But in science and engineering, you often have to, do those cycles again, and again and again. It's okay. And then also, I think communicating with children that it's okay if you didn't get it right the first time. Most people don't get it right the first time. It's not failure. That one quote about, failure is not an option. I think there's a misconception around that, because it's not about failure. It's a learning opportunity. It's data. It's data is what you're, what you're receiving if it doesn't go according to as you expect initially.
Absolutely. One, I think one of the places that we know that whole concept of failure is not an option came from NASA, right? With that's kind of coined and attributed to NASA, which on the flip side is very iterative these days. So you look at the Elon Musk. My husband, by the way, geek that he is, every day he sits at work with his Boca Chica feed on his computer for what SpaceX is doing with the hoppers down in the Boca Chica launch area.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
So now you know what my household is like. We have launch calendars.
I love it. I love it.
We have all kinds of things. We have star finders on all of our devices, but that project actually is just so important, I think, for kids to be able to watch, because it's been about the failures that have happened within the SpaceX model. They'll test something and blow it up just to see how it blows up.
Mm-hmm.
They launch something and see whether or not they can recover it, and they change that model really quickly. I mean, like the builds that they've been doing down there, they've been doing in months versus, the programs that our government had under NASA that were taking years because we applied very strict project management to them and, reporting and
Mm-hmm.
everything else. And, those are great things. I love Agile and and these were definitely more Agile. I love project management, but like sometimes we have to figure out how we combine those so we can make the most progress. So it's pretty cool stuff. But,
I agree. One of the most, I would say, fascinating experiences I had as a classroom teacher was there was this program funded by NASA. I think it's gone into hiatus, but it was the reduced gravity. I can't remember the program, but it's like a microgravity program where educators, they apply for this program and they work with their students to come up with some type of experiment that they want to test in microgravity. So it's essentially like you're in outer space. And so myself, along with some educators in Arizona, we were able to connect our kids together. They came up with a project. They were interested in bubbles. Like how would bubbles fly in outer space? Like what does that look like? And so we were able to go to Johnson Space Center down in Texas. And at first when I got there, I was like, what did I get myself into? What did I get myself into? Because I get a little bit of motion sickness.
oh no.
Right. And we were supposed to fly in one of those simulators that they put
Oh
astronauts
wow.
in called the Weightless Wonder. And
How
so,
cool.
yeah, so it's this plane, for lack of a better word, that does parabolas in the air. And then as you're doing these parabolas, you experience these different types of like gravity. And so I was like, what did I get myself into? But it was amazing. It was amazing. It was fantastic. The students weren't able to attend, but we were able to record it and take that data back to students for them to analyze.
Oh
So,
wow.
cool projects like that. And not all of them have to be, what I call high tech either. Like you can do tons of low tech things at home and in your classroom with students. Think about cooking. Cooking has tons of STEM and STEAM included in it. I mean, the art of presenting food so that it's appeasing and attractive to students, the chemistry and the measurement that's involved with baking or
Sure.
making meals. I mean, just again, these everyday experiences.
Right.
Even for Project Smart, our focus for Project Smart is having students to observe their community, think about their community, and if they were to enhance their community using technology, how would they make their community smarter? And so that's the focus of that Project Smart is how can I make my community smarter leveraging technology? And again, they come up with the ideas. We don't
That's
say,
cool.
no, you can't do that. Go with it. Go with it.
That's cool. So that's like almost like the destination imagination model.
Mhm.
So yeah, obviously we are DI family as well, and part of the coaching model on that was that you didn't suggest solutions. That was just
That's
really
right.
a big faux pas on the coach's part because you wanted to spur that interest and the tinkering and the iterative process. My daughter was a DI person all the way up through college, so.
Excellent.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, it's a pretty geeky household. Um, but, again, like, what can we take away from that we can apply to our everyday world? Do we present our adult learners in our environments with a challenge and don't give them necessarily a way to solve and let them come up with it? I mean, I know in my own business, and I work for a tech company. Or computer tech company, we're looking at how can we challenge our learners to demonstrate proficiency, and maybe it really is something like that. What else can we bring to the table? From we've learned from working with younger people. How can we challenge the adults in the same way?
Yeah, and what I see happen is a lot of times there's some unlearning that needs to happen because again, we've gone through school and there's one right answer and well, what should the answer be? And sometimes that can be a place of struggle or frustration for
Mm-hmm.
educators. Like, well, what is the answer? What is the answer?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, what can you come up with? Does your solution meet the constraints or the requirements? It doesn't have to always look a certain way. And so there's some unlearning that has to happen sometimes for teachers, for educators.
Well, and you said the magic word in my world, which is requirements gathering for every project that I work on. And I'm thinking, all right, so if we've gathered a set of requirements, can we then kind of, unleash people to go and find solutions without time? And then that is kind of the whole concept behind, a business analyst job, is to not identify the solution right off the bat, to take the requirements and then go out there and figure out what works. But, can we do that in our business settings? To say, okay, this is what we're trying to solve for. We're not going to tell you how to solve it. Like what can you bring to the table? I mean, I feel like, companies would probably see better innovation if we allowed that kind of free thinking.
And the same thing for the engineering design model. That's essentially it as well. So also making those connections that the core concepts behind the scientific method, as well as the engineering design model, you can find them in a variety of different industries. I mean, think about investigators, like police investigators. They go through the scientific process and the engineering process in their work. Like you just said, business, in the business industry. So it's in a lot of industries, this model, this concept, these concepts, these way of thinking. And it's not just in these silos and these isolations. So again, that content integration and that real world rigor is also key. And then, there is a difference between, say, for example, me being a biology teacher and having been a biologist. So there's some things that I just may not know about, what are the latest trends in biology and challenges that I may experience. So I think it's also helpful and great to be able to, like your experience in high school, to bring in people from industry into classrooms, whether it's virtual or in person, so that they can speak from their own experiences. And I think in those cases, representation is so key for students. Representation is key for students. They need to see people of all colors, all cultures, and how they contribute to the science and the engineering and the arts world. I think that is so important. So important.
Well, I agree, because I mean, these are topics that impact us all, I mean, and we need that representation across the board in, the science communities and in every community for that matter. How do you get around bias? So like, I mean, you mentioned, you might come from a background where what is biology, but maybe the solution to a problem in business or in science is not necessarily. How do you get around that bias that we all bring in?
So to me, to be honest, and this is just Bejanae speaking, I don't think you get around bias. I don't think you get around bias. Everybody has bias, period. Everybody has bias. Yep. But I think the key is to be aware of it.
Okay.
To be aware when it's showing up. And then also to hear from others who may have different perspective than you. I mean, we all have biases, whether it's implicit, subconscious, we all have it. That's human nature. But being cognizant that you have it, and then, like I said, inviting others to the table to have a different perspective. Again, these are data points. This is data to help you to accomplish what you want to accomplish better in a more efficient way. Hopefully a more, systemic, as well as our whole systems approach, way as well.
So it's interesting you mentioned data, because data science is another one of those big areas that's really being noticed across the board. And that's, I mean, it's always been a key thing in science, right? I think businesses are starting to realize the value of data and data analysts in the business. Do they fall into that kind of science technology?
I think so. Analyzing, I would say so. I would say so. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Because I know even in my own industry, like almost every organization that I work with across the business has somebody who can do the data analysis. And so, that's years ago. I don't recall there being a call for people who were data analysts or even strict data scientists in the business world. So, I do think this is a good thing. We're starting to see that kind of blend and crossover, between, the more academic side of kind of who we are
Mhm.
and how we apply those things to business. How
And, and back to your point, just about the bias piece. So, understanding everyone has it, recognizing, you know, where your biases may be,
hmm
inviting others to the table with different perspectives, but then also questioning, like, why do we do what we do? Is there another way? And I
right.
think that that speaks to, STEM at its core. Like, there are different ways to approach this. And although this may be our framework, like you said, maybe academic culture or mindset, there are other ways to do it. There's other
Right.
ways to do it, and being open to those other ways as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think leaders actually, if they're really smart people, will open up that table to say, hey, I want to hear from everyone. I want to hear from the people that I might not have talked to. I want to know what the perspectives are. To me, that's just part of like the leadership mentality is to be able to defer to people who might be smarter. Yeah, probably are.
We all have our talents. We all have our talents.
Exactly. And also to be able to understand their perspectives and allow that to sink in. So, and especially now, I mean, like, we all know what kind of craziness we're living in, and, we need to entertain their perspectives and be able to, bring in people from everywhere to speak on, the scientific topics and the perspectives and how things impact people. And because, there's just no way that we can ever, well, because of our bias, get outside of ourselves except to really open our mindsets. So
Mhm.
very cool stuff.
Completely agree.
Yeah. I wish we could solve for all of this in an hour.
I know. I know.
But I do, my own perspective, this is my own personal thing. I really think the science, technology, engineering, and math and leading, hopefully, or helping students understand the value of getting into these fields, to me, is a way to level set some of the things that are really problematic in our society right now. I mean, our scientists and our engineers and the people who are skilled, they have a clout, right? And so I think we want to skill people up to have that kind of clout. And I'm just really, really passionate about seeing kids get into technology careers, even if it's programming, and providing the venue for that, or solving for the digital divide so that they can have access to the kinds of learning that they need to get into better jobs. And yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of facets of this.
Yeah, but it's all
Yeah,
connected, though. That's the
it
thing. Like,
is.
these
It
aren't
is.
independent things. They all influence each other.
They really do. I mentioned the digital divide to somebody recently, and I don't think they realize how impacted some marginalized populations are by even having access to online
Hmm.
things. So
And then here's another thing to blow your mind. I was talking to a professor um, of mine, and we've become really close colleagues. So yes, there's a digital divide in access and
hmm
reliable technology or
hmm
devices, but
hmm
then there's a group of a population who are not interested in tech. So then what do you do? What do you do in those regards? And so I know one of the things that we try to do for our learners is to have like these low to no tech options learning
hmm
experiences, as
hmm
well as
hmm
maybe some of the higher tech ones. So you know I'm sure, as you know, too, in adult education, people come with different experiences, different levels of expertise, different abilities, interests and things like that. And you just have to meet the learners where they are. You have to meet the
right.
learners where they are.
That's like such a great piece of advice. You do have to meet the learners where they are, and that's part of the assessment. And to determine what do they know, what do they care about, and I don't think we do enough in any scenario to really find out what somebody's interests are. Yeah, you mentioned that earlier,
Mm-hmm.
but like how can we solve for that? How can we find out what their interests are and how to motivate them? I mean, like there's a TV show. I think it's on maybe Saturday morning. It's a CBS show, and it's girls who are scientists who do really cool things that are science based, but also kind of in the arena which we would traditionally think of for being something women would be interested in, like the science of makeup. So I mean that's the technology behind makeup. I'm like, who knew? But it's a real thing. I mean, there are
Absolutely.
women in science who develop formulations for making us hopefully look better.
Yeah, and think about, well, from my experiences, like, so there's like this stereotype that women are nurturers and things of that nature, and that they tend to care for others. So it makes sense to me that to see women in engineering and science fields, because those fields are to help make society better, right? So yeah, let's definitely create more pathways for women into those fields.
Yeah, something I
That's a
care a lot
win.
about. Yeah, it really is. I mean, and it's something that means a lot to me. My son was a person who was interested in science, but I think I probably focused more on my daughter. I mean, my son kind of did it on his own, and I think I kind of maybe pushed it a little bit more with my daughter because I wanted for her to grow up differently than I had grown up, where the stereotype wasn't the expectation that she was going to be the family nurturer. I wanted her to go out and do what she does now, which is set things on fire to test them.
Love it.
In her job. Super cool. So a little bit different topic. How have educators, I mean, we know they've been affected by COVID. How have they been affected by COVID, and how can they overcome like these crazy challenges that we have of having to teach online and social distance and, wear a mask and not touch common things? Like, I mean, like, how can we get beyond some of that to still continue to develop like that excitement about science, technology, and engineering and math?
Yeah, so kind of as I mentioned before, like I don't know how to get past those things because that's current news, right? That's current events that's our reality, what we're all living. But even amongst and amidst that, um, there's still ample opportunities to engage students in science and STEM. So kits are a popular thing as well. Being able to ship students kits to do
Okay.
those hands-on activities, at home. While now we may not be able to do an actual field trip, there are plenty of examples of virtual field trips that can be conducted. That's one of our
Right.
courses that we offer, is how to expand your classroom borders, through virtual field trips. So virtual field trips is another. There are also a lot of online programs that will have students to be able to like simulate experiments and investigations online. So you still can tap into those hands-on kinesthetic pieces. There are programs that are available that can offer those experiences online. Again, it depends on funding and what schools have access and can afford. Virtual field trips, like I say, is another. Bringing in career professionals is another great one. Again, to engage students and understand career fields as well. And then also, what I don't think happens enough, but providing opportunities. And this could happen at home or even in the classroom, but letting students be the creator of some of their learning, right? So what projects or things that they're interested in? COVID is a big thing. How could that turn into an engineering challenge or a scientific challenge or a project for students to investigate and help maybe their family or families or the community? So taking those real world events, everybody's been impacted by COVID. So everybody knows about COVID. So let's use that topic, as something that students can be empowered to address.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's, I think, what kind of happened with the Rube Goldberg challenge was, they had to make it relevant. I don't know if I told you, or probably people know, I'm a GIS geek, Geographic Information
Oh,
Systems geek.
I took a class in undergrad in GIS many moons ago. It's so cool.
So, I mean, there's no situation that we could have ever imagined where it's more applicable to understand the geographic basis of the spread of a disease. And so I put together some resources for K through 12 teachers as part of a master's program for using GIS technology. So that's Geographic Information Systems, for anybody who doesn't know, is basically it's like GPS. It is based on GPS, but it's really much more like, it's more permanent because most of the signals that that reflect the GPS that gets used, I'm getting kind of technical here, comes from satellites. And so essentially it's like kind of almost a permanent technology that exists out there without the internet. We can map things, and we can, attach data points to, geographic location points. Say I find an animal in the woods and I want to say, okay, I found it at this location. Well, I can actually, like literally upload that data so that it's kind of relevant to that specific GPS point on Earth. And there's so many scientific applications for that, but COVID is the biggest example I could have ever imagined for teaching like geographic reference. There's just so many opportunities there. I'm hoping that, the schools are really kind of adopting that as well. But yeah, definitely a geek out.
Yeah, but great use of technology. And like you said, the social studies with the geography, as well as, there's tons of data maps, all the time. So tying in that mathematics, all of that, the science behind, public health, and, how common illnesses spread, all of it. That's STEAM. Students could even make public service announcements if they wanted to, create some videos. Flipgrid, I know, is very popular. Students can create videos using Flipgrid, and they're tying in that language arts because they have to develop their script. So again, that's a real life example. That's and it's still connected to the standards, because all those subject areas teachers have to cover. They have to hit all those things, right? And yeah, and it's integrated.
And students are demonstrating at that point what they've learned, if they're creating, those kinds of assets. Super cool.
Exactly.
So you mentioned something else too, and that's, schools not necessarily having the funding. So that's something else you do in your business as well, right? Is help people find funding?
That is correct. Okay. So having been a teacher, there's this whole, I'm going to call it a phenomenon, where teachers usually, there's statistics that show that at least 94% of public school teachers in the U.S. Pay for instructional supplies out of their own pockets.
Wow.
And so given the fact that COVID has happened, that number has increased and spiked, and teachers are spending on average $740 or more a year on materials. And so I was able to do, when I was a classroom teacher, to tap in to my previous experience at scholarship writing, and threaded that over to grant writing. And so I do offer grant writing training for teachers as well. And also for school teams, because funding is key, right? You want to have some cool materials. You want to do STEM projects or STEAM projects, or just any kind of project. Usually that is tied to funding. And so we want to help support and strengthen school communities in that way, and being able to secure grants to be able to do those cool things in the classroom, and not have to rely on teachers to have to provide that support.
Wow. That's one nebulous skill set that I've never developed.
But guess what? And this is what teachers don't know. And I'm going to call you a teacher, instructional designers as well. If you have experience with lesson designing, if you can design a lesson, you can grant write.
Okay.
You can grant write. There are many.
Okay.
So I make those connections for teachers or educators in those trainings that I offer. Because again, you don't want to feel like, oh, this is something else that I can't. This is something else I have to learn. Well, guess what? You already have the skills. Let me walk you on over to the other side and show you what you already do. You can use in another area.
Well, and we do grant writing and science writing in business as well. So I've worked in industries before where there were federally funded research and development centers that worked with my business. And so, we had to do the reporting and the science writing, as kind of an exchange there. But, that's, we tend to think of a lot of that as being just very academic, but it's not. I mean, there are a lot of businesses that are engaged in studies, and do that science reporting as well. So my undergrad actually was in technical journalism, which was more.
Oh, wow. Right? Oh, yeah, definitely so. Definitely so. Still a great skill. But again, it's not just used in isolation. There's other areas and industries you can use that in.
Yeah.
So,
very cool. I went to an Aggie school, Colorado State, and so I think the intent was to produce people to go out and write about agriculture. Which
gotcha.
ago, how I kind of got into that whole biodiversity thing.
Right. Got you. But you're still
Super
using
cool.
those skills to this day, though. You're still
Yeah.
using those skills. Mm-hmm.
Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour, but
Okay.
somebody did say they couldn't hear you, but I've been able to hear you okay. So I think it might just be a one-off. Christine, that was Christine actually that said that.
Hey,
So
Christine.
I know. Christine's one of my favorite people.
She's the best.
Yeah, she is
She's
the
the
best.
best.
So, just as we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to let us know? I know that you have your own like social media. Where can people
Yeah.
find you?
I
Like,
sure do. I sure do.
so,
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love for the audience members to stay connected. You can reach us at www.bkconsultancy.org. I'll put my email there. I'm also on LinkedIn, or you can follow us on our social media. So we're on Facebook and Twitter at BK Consultancy. We just got onto Instagram. That's me coming into the 21st century at BK_consultancy. And then we're also on YouTube and LinkedIn as well. If you check out BK International Education Consultancy.
okay, very cool. Yeah, I did find your YouTube. I found your trip for teachers to Cuba. I'm like, was so jealous.
Yeah, so that's another one of our experiences to make it real for teachers. So let's not just tell you about it. Let's immerse you in it, so
Cool.
you can experience it for yourself.
Oh
Mm-hmm.
wow, excellent. Thank you for sharing this. This is great. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, everybody definitely actually, and Luis has put up some more links here too for your Instagram. For
Thank
those
you,
of us who
Louise.
are cooler than just going to email. I do love Instagram. It's fun. So very cool. All right, excellent. Thank you, Luis. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Louise.
Yeah, definitely. So everybody, please check out Bejanae's business. And even if you don't work with K through 12 learners, I mean, the application of what we can do to engage the adults that work with K through 12 learners is so important in our businesses. No matter how incredibly dull our businesses might be or how exciting they might be. I mean, I've worked in amazing science fields and I've worked in tech for most of my life, so I can see the application. But awesome stuff. And everyone, have a great day. And Bejanae, thank you for joining us. And, we'd like to come back and talk about some other things. There's so many things to unpack.
I know. Thank
But,
you, Toddi, so much. I would love to come back anytime.
Alrighty. Okay. Take care, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.